So good afternoon, everyone. Happy Monday. This is Audrey Russo. I am thrilled to be here today. I'm thrilled at our guest. Hopefully you had a chance as you roll in, had a chance to hear a song called Hava Nagila. And we'll talk about a little bit about how that fits in as we bring our guest on the show in a moment. So like every day, we are doing business as usual and bringing together the community, and today is no exception. And we're thrilled to have Myra Awodey, who is here from Duolingo. We're going to talk about the launch of their 40th language, which is Yiddish. But before we do that, I want to give a shout out to Huntington Bank. I want to thank them for being our sponsors and believing in our work and pulling the community together and telling stories and shining the light on the incredible things that are happening right here at our footsteps. So thank you, Huntington Bank, and also 40 by 80. That's the longitude and latitude of Pittsburgh, and that's the wholly owned subsidiary of the Pittsburgh Technology Council, which is our charitable arm. And you'll be hearing more about our work in talent development as well as apprenticeship programs in tech. So our passion is to make sure that we don't leave people behind, and we're making sure that we're creating an inclusive opportunity for all as the tech ecosystem across Pittsburgh continues to proliferate. So I am now, we've muted your microphones, but if you want to dance to, more than welcome to dance. And if you want to, talk in the background, that's fine, but we've muted your microphones and we've allowed for a chat. And the chat, Jonathan Kirsting, who's here with us each and every day, he's Vice President of all things marketing and media and storytelling. He is going to be monitoring all that. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And I'm bringing up Myra Awodey. And welcome to the show, Myra. Thank you so much for being here.
Good to be here. Thanks, Audrey.
So let's talk a little bit before we jump into, the language and Yiddish and all that fun stuff. And just as a disclaimer for everyone to know, Jonathan knows a lot of Yiddish. He was raised in Squirrel Hill and seemed to have a lot of friends who embedded Yiddish into their language. And my mother, who had passed, was fluent in Yiddish in reading and writing. So I've been on Louise for many, many years to make sure that Yiddish is one of the languages. And they just did a beta launch on April 6th. And there's been a lot of news about this language all over the world. So we brought Myra on, but before we talk a little bit about the language and all that, I want everyone to get to know Myra. Her name is Myra Awodey. And welcome, Myra. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Tell us about what you do at Duolingo and a little bit about yourself, your own journey.
I am a community manager at Duolingo, but I actually started at Duolingo about 10 years ago as a German language specialist. So I grew up in Germany and the US. My mom is German, my dad is American. And I grew up bilingual. I went to college and I studied environmental science and urban planning. And then this opportunity at Duolingo came up. They needed a German language expert to create a German for English speakers course and an English for German speakers. And the mission of kind of making free language education available to everyone really inspired me. So I came back just for a summer thinking, hey, I'll try this out. This is a cool startup. My family's in Pittsburgh. I love it here. And 10 years later, it's just kind of taken off. It's crazy. So I've worn a lot of different hats. I've played a lot of different roles at Duolingo, starting out as a language expert, learning how to use our tools to kind of create language courses on the app. And then over time, as there was this big outpouring of support from other language communities who wanted to help us create courses, I kind of became the liaison between the teams that were creating courses and our internal technology teams that were creating the tools to create those courses. So I've been, most of the last couple of years, I've been spending helping people use Duolingo's tools to create free language courses. And yeah, it's been a great ride. And the Yiddish team has been especially just engaging and fun to work with. And the response has just been so overwhelming, so much more than what we would have expected when we started out many years ago. So yeah, it's very exciting.
So here you are, that you've been there 10 years, you're a native Pittsburgher, is that
Yep.
correct? So how did the language piece infuse itself into your own life and your own work?
I was studying German literature in school, and I kind of was always drawn to language and literature and the humanities, but also the sciences. So I was trying to figure out how I could kind of do both. And after college, I actually went to Berlin to start a master's program in urban planning, thinking that that would be a nice way to kind of bridge the gap between the two. So learn about the kind of latest German innovations in urban planning, sustainable design, environmental design, socially equitable kind of planning processes to stem the effects of gentrification. So I was kind of in a different area when the Duolingo opportunity came up, but I happened to just, have the native German speaking background, and that's what they needed. So I kind of fell into it without this being the plan. I didn't think that I would end up in tech. But yeah, it was so interesting to work with all these people from different backgrounds on this project that everyone really believed in, with this, global mission to kind of counteract the inequality that comes from different levels of access to education. And that was, I think, the driving force behind Luis, our founder's idea. And it's kind of been the common thread throughout and a big part of what has made Duolingo so successful.
Yeah, it really is. It's pretty true. So do you use any of your academic background in terms of, economic development or anything in terms of the work that you do? How does it play in there?
I use mostly I don't. I use just my kind of German language skills and then the experience from 10 years of kind of being involved in building Duolingo's tools and watching Duolingo grow and thinking through all the problems that come up when you're working with global communities. But one thing I think that I've noticed over time, there are a lot of parallels. So I was obsessed with evolution in college, and I was studying environmental like habitat fracturing and kind of endangered species. And so I was always fascinated with the parallels between language evolution and sort of species evolution. And then the corollary to that is kind of what happens when something is vulnerable or on the edge of going extinct, and what are the factors that can kind of help bring something back or exacerbate those processes. So there's a little bit of overlap, but nothing
There is.
really
I
used
mean,
very
it's
practically.
great that you have the wide perspective. It probably brings a lot to the role. So you actually, let's just talk as one more point. You actually were at Duolingo at the onset.
Yeah, I was at Duolingo before they even launched publicly. So it was right after. So Duolingo started as kind of a project by Luis von Ahn and Severin Hacker, who were at Carnegie Mellon School of Computer Science. And before it spun out, or right after it spun out of CMU, we moved to Walnut Street. We had a little
I remember
office
that space
above Jitters, yep. And that was when I started. So we were kind of scrambling to get a few basic courses up and running so that we could launch. And then I was there for the launch. We went to New York, and it was a really big, exciting milestone, but we only launched with a few courses. We just had English for Spanish speakers, Spanish for English speakers, German, French, Italian and Portuguese. We didn't even think that we would add that much. We kind of thought, these are the main ones. We want to have a huge impact, so this is what we should focus on. So that was kind of interesting to go from that to then hearing all of these people kind of come out of the woodwork and say, hey, what about this language? I want to learn this language, or hey, I want to help you teach this other language, and figuring out how to open our tools up for that.
So what is the #1 most used language from the origin of learning English?
Spanish, by far.
Spanish
And
is by
then
far.
the
Okay.
second largest course is actually people learning English from Spanish. So Duolingo is really, really big in South America.
Okay. So bi-directional. What's #2? You know what #2 is?
That's a good question. I think it's French for English speakers. And then sometimes they switch. So it's like French, German, and Portuguese are kind of the vying for third place.
And then the interesting sort of outlier that has become fascinating is Gaelic, right? Isn't there something that's interesting that no one expected about Gaelic?
There are a few languages that are maybe considered minoritized or vulnerable. So one of the first ones that we started to teach just kind of on a whim, because we had a very passionate high schooler reach out to us, was Irish Gaelic. And this kid was learning Irish Gaelic in school, and there's a big revival movement in Ireland, and he was just so passionate that Louis said, okay, let's give it a try. And within just a year of kind of publishing this Irish course, there were more Irish learners on Duolingo than there were native speakers. So that kind of gave us a signal that we had something pretty powerful. And that's not to say that Duolingo is going to like bring back languages single-handedly, but that it's kind of like a time capsule. But not only that, also a way to continue to teach these languages and make them accessible to people who maybe don't have in-person access to native speakers. So after the Irish course, we kind of realized we do also have a responsibility to smaller languages, especially given today when everyone's learning English and Spanish, what are the effects of that across linguistic diversity? And so then we also got involved with Welsh, Scottish Gaelic. We recently started teaching Hawaiian, Navajo. We're working on a Haitian Creole course, and what else?
Anything fast?
Guarani. Yeah, a lot of kind of interesting, more niche languages. And then we also have some what are called con languages, constructed languages. So we have Esperanto, as well as High Valyrian and Klingon. So those are fun.
Really fun
side projects too. Yeah,
that's fun. So let's talk about Yiddish. And Lenore Blum is on here, and she said that she's been a mentor of Louise's, her and her husband, for a while, but they started out as a Project Olympus probe at CMU. So it's pretty funny, and we worked really hard. Lenore did, to keep Louise in Pittsburgh. So, and then how popular is Arabic, real quick, and then I want to get into talking about Yiddish.
Let me look up what our numbers are on that, but Arabic is very popular. We also had an interesting kind of spike in people who wanted to learn Arabic from European languages. So during the refugee crisis, we started Arabic for Swedish speakers and Arabic for German speakers. And I think that was a really big kind of push to put Duolingo, in the hands of people where it would really make a big difference. Let's see, Arabic for English speakers has about 3.1 million active learners.
Wow.
So
how many new people sign up a day, just in general?
That's a good question. I actually don't know. I'm sure it's like hundreds of thousands. A lot of people sign up and then kind of only do a couple lessons, and then they fall off, and then maybe they come back a month or two later. So what we hear a lot is, oh yeah, I have Duolingo on my phone. I really like it. I'm not using it as much as I should be. But, eventually you come back around, so it works out.
So let's talk a little bit about Yiddish, because that was the original reason. So there are three main dialects actually of Yiddish.
Mhm.
They're called Litvaks, Northern Yiddish, and spoken in Lithuania, Belarus, and Latvia, and then Galician or Central Yiddish, and that I believe came from Poland or parts of Hungary, and then Southeastern Yiddish, which is spoken in Romania and the Ukraine. Even though there aren't a lot of Jews there, that's still a language, and which is often considered like a compromised dialect. I mean, we see that in the United States as well. So Southeastern Yiddish is the form of the language most depicted in Yiddish theater and in Yiddish film, and probably what people like Jonathan and I and other people in Pittsburgh who are Jewish are familiar with in terms of, the language. And this is a language that has been shrinking over the years. I would say at least over the 75 years, maybe if not longer. Why did you want to provide this offering? Can you go back in time and tell us why Yiddish? I mean, I personally was bugging Louise for about 5 years, but I want to know the real reason, because it had nothing to do with me bugging him.
It may have. We did start building it about 5 years ago. But honestly, it was kind of a response to the volume and the quality of interest that we were getting, both to learn and to teach the language. So when we decide to teach a new language course, we usually look at three things. We look at how big the impact will be. So that's usually how many people are interested in it, but it could also be, how critically endangered is the language. How well suited is Duolingo to teach the language? So from a technical perspective, do we have the abilities to handle the writing system? Are we going to be able to grade the input of users? Is it written in a standard kind of Unicode kind of text? A lot of languages just haven't been standardized to that extent, and we can't teach them because of that. And then the third kind of factor that we look at is the quality of contributors who would want to get involved. And it was just really high. We had a lot of people from the Yiddish Book Center and kind of Yiddishists and scholars who were really into this cause. And over time, the team changed. So we kind of got some people who started 5 years ago, and then they got busy because they were leaders in their communities and educators doing a ton of other stuff. And then we had a different constellation of people, but throughout there were people who are kind of experts in the field, not just casual Yiddishists who really felt strongly about teaching Yiddish, and they had a background in how to create the curriculum. So when we have that opportunity to work with, world-class leaders in the language revitalization movement, it just seemed too good to pass up. So we started the course about 5 years ago. It has changed a lot since the early days, and it's actually gone through a couple different iterations, deciding which dialect to teach, what the audio should sound like, and even things like, should we use the Hebrew script, or should it be the kind of phonetic pronunciation in the Latinized script? So there were kind of a lot of different iterations over time, both of the team and the content, and kind of the perspective of the course.
So wasn't there like different communities that you actually became immersed in? Were any of them in New York? Were they like in the Brooklyn community, in the Orthodox community?
Exactly. We did have a lot of Yiddish speakers from the Brooklyn community who were working on this. And then it kind of became an interesting hybrid. So Mina Viswanath is she's from a prominent Yiddishist family. She's actually an engineer herself. But her mom recently published the new Yiddish dictionary. Her brother translated Harry Potter into Yiddish. Her father was kind of groundbreaking in terms of like secular academic standardization, and YIVO was kind of her approach. So marrying the standardized written format with the colloquial pronunciations from the Brooklyn community was kind of a result of the people that were already working on the course, talking to each other, going back and forth, and trying to figure out what would be kind of the most useful to the most number of people and what would be kind of the most appropriate. And the way Mina puts it is, she knew that no matter what they did, they were gonna make some people angry. So they didn't have the pressure of making the perfect decision, because every decision was going to be flawed in some way. So that's how they ended up with that.
So actually, it's Yiddish is actually uses Hebrew letters.
Mm-hmm.
So, people like Jonathan and I, and my mother used to say that this is sloppy. We just want to speak in Yiddish.
Yeah.
Right? We don't want to write in Yiddish. We just want to have a conversation in Yiddish. And so I know by going through the beta, I had to sort of beef up on my whole alphabet. Yeah. And I would imagine that probably caused a lot of interesting conversations around the integrity of the language and the people like Jonathan and I who just want to use those words and talk in a way and not use the alphabet. Do you see that with other languages as well? Like when people get together, that they just sort of want to speak it and not necessarily have to go through and learn the alphabet?
Yeah, I think that's a kind of decision that we often have to make when there's a different script and there are two variants of the language. There's one, in the kind of formalized alphabet, and then there's one that's just kind of spelled phonetically. And we got a lot of people saying, you guys are doing this all wrong. American Jews are just going to want to do it with the script that they already know. And that's a fair point. I think we could also in the future offer another course, maybe that just focuses on the speaking and listening component, and maybe doesn't have that extra hurdle of learning a new script. But we wanted to kind of start out with all the tools and bells and whistles that we had, and we had worked really hard on creating these what we call character challenges in order to teach Asian languages. So we did have, several years there where we were testing how do you teach a new writing script on an app, because it's just a unique challenge. And then when we had this breakthrough and we were able to teach Mandarin and Japanese and Korean, we thought, why not? This seems like a cool challenge to try. So that's why they did it that way. But I'm sure in the future, you could make an argument for an additional Yiddish course that either focuses on a different dialect or a different writing system.
Right. Yeah. So Jonathan, there's some questions out there, comments. You want to grab some of them?
Myra, thanks for joining us today. Love the conversation. We're all huge fans of Duolingo, that is for sure. So we have a question from that asks, how popular is Duolingo for schools? Do minority languages like Yiddish see decent engagement on the platform, or is it mostly individuals pursuing study on their own?
That's a great question. I think it's kind of changing right now. So Duolingo for Schools, for those who don't know, is a part of Duolingo. It's a platform that teachers can use with their students to track student progress, create assignments, kind of create an overview of what their class's strengths and weaknesses are. And we've seen them used in a lot of different ways. We actually did a lot of outreach locally. We went into the Obama Academy and Brashear and Perry, and kind of watched teachers using technology in language classes and using Duolingo specifically in language classes to learn how we could best support them. And teachers have found that Duolingo is really useful as a study tool that students can use on their own, either during summer break or for extra credit. Sometimes they use it in class. So if there are 10 minutes extra at the end of class, then everyone just does their Duolingo and the teacher kind of has extra time to focus on the students who need more attention, and the ones who are kind of more advanced are able to have something more challenging to work on because Duolingo is so personalized. So I think Duolingo for Schools has a lot of promise. It's very popular. Right now, more language teachers are aware of Duolingo just on its own, and not a lot of language teachers know about Duolingo for Schools. So that's the challenge, is to kind of figure out, where is that sweet spot? Where can Duolingo add the most value for teachers in a either high school classroom setting or even college graduate kind of setting?
Very cool. And Eric King wants to know, he says he knows that Duolingo is looking to expand its data science and analytics competency. So what's driving that?
Yeah, we have a lot of data, as you can imagine.
I believe
So there's a lot of potential, I think, for research in learning science and language acquisition. And our teams are always publishing new insights about how the brain learns and how the brain accesses vocabulary and grammar concepts and how best to teach language. And we have this really kind of elegant back-end system under the hood. So Duolingo looks very simple and gamified, but the kind of AI that's happening to serve up the content to the learners is actually very sophisticated. And we think a lot about spaced repetition. We think a lot about different styles of learning. So some people, maybe have more trouble learning how to listen or how to speak or how to write than others. And so coming up with algorithms that kind of tailor the Duolingo experience to the individual learner so that when you're spending time on Duolingo, you're actually really making the most of that time has been just incredibly powerful. And so now we're seeing studies that you can spend something like 3 months on Duolingo doing a couple minutes a day, and you'll be able to cover about as much as 4 high school or 4 college semesters of a language course.
Yeah.
So kind of figuring out how to make the most of that time when you're studying on Duolingo by yourself. It might not get you fluent without actually having a person to speak to, but like, how can we make the best use of that time and that technology?
So yeah, Ellie Gordon just gives you a shout out. You can read it, just saying David, who works at Duolingo, taught her Yiddish classes, and it was great. So now that she knows how to write it, Jonathan, maybe we need to ask Ellie about that. I will speak it, but yeah, the initiatives are just phenomenal. So can
I
you
just like the occasional word from time to time.
so can you speak Yiddish at all? Can you say something to us in Yiddish?
I can't. I think I could probably order a bagel because that was our launch campaign.
Yeah.
So it was like ich will ein Bagel mit mir, but it's really my Yiddish would probably just be a sort of German Yiddishized kind of combination. So I can understand when people are speaking Yiddish, and I can kind of decipher it if it were written phonetically, but I don't.
So
speak
I'm
it.
kvelling over this. You know what that means?
Gushing.
I'm absolutely gushing over this. And in some ways, I'm a little verklempt, So Jonathan, what does that mean?
It takes me a little chutzpah to be thinking about this, but I know you're all choked up, Audrey.
I'm choked up. I'm choked up. I'm choked up for a lot of reasons. And so how excited has the Pittsburgh community been? Because I know there is a group that actually that meets regularly. How engaged have they been in all this?
I think everyone has been just really excited. We've been getting a lot of feedback, of course, from all of my friends and family and mother-in-laws are sending us, all kinds of things like missing accept translations. So one interesting thing about a Duolingo course is that when it launches into beta, which means that it's not perfect. And we actually rely on the numbers of users to really polish things over time. So we want thousands and thousands of people to tell us, hey, you could do a better recording here, or you're missing an answer that should have been accepted here. And it takes a couple of months for the course to kind of what we call stabilize. So right now, if you take the Duolingo Yiddish course and you submit feedback, which you can do from within the app, you're actually helping us improve the course, and you're giving the team feedback so that it has a signal if it wants to iterate on the course in the future and expand it and make it better. So that's kind of a big part of it, is this early adopter community giving us feedback about it. And of course, some people have very strong opinions, and they don't like the decisions that we've made, and that's their right. But all of the feedback in aggregate is super valuable for us, and that kind of tells us what we should be doing differently.
And that's what Louise and Severin have built their companies on, always on iterative feedback. I mean, even with reCAPTCHA, everything's been based on input and then, continuous improvement. Obviously now with AI, we can do that, a lot faster. So do you know how many people are using Yiddish right now? Have they signed up? Do you have any info?
I believe we have 208,000 active learners.
No way.
That's a lot.
No way.
For
That's
just
awesome.
being out a couple of weeks. That's really amazing.
Really
not all
amazing.
of them have probably stuck with it. A lot of people have done
Right.
Let's try it out, but still, it's a lot. And I don't know what the number of native speakers is, but it's Mina said that they were close or something. So that's kind of amazing.
It's amazing, because I think that there were really considered like 600 or 700 people that actually still speak Yiddish. So that's pretty significant when you think about that.
Yeah. And I think it's just, a lot of people reconnecting maybe with their heritage and the diaspora. But then I think there are also people who are just kind of linguistically interested in it, and just as a cool language to learn for polyglots too. So it's an interesting mix of users, for sure.
It's great. Myra, I can't thank you enough. Myra Awodey, she has been with Duolingo for 10 years, doing a lot of interesting things, including community outreach as it relates to language and engagement. This has been a treat to have you on the show. I know that we kicked off with me playing Hava Nagila, and some of you who don't know that, you can go to YouTube and listen to that. There's also strong Yiddish theater that was alive and well pre-COVID, but hopefully that will be resurrected in the near future. So Right at Our Footsteps came out of Carnegie Mellon Project Olympus, and is a massive company right here doing amazing things. And Myra, you're lucky, have been there for a decade. So I want to thank everyone. We'll see you tomorrow, same time. Stay safe, everyone. Remember to get vaccinated.
Thanks so much. This was
Thank you.
fun. Bye.